All right, guys. I am Matthew Geller, Dr. Matthew Geller. I am founder of New Grad Optometry, and I'm super excited to be doing our second, but really one of our more official Google Hangouts today, where we're going to be interviewing iCare advisors and two incredible gentlemen who started that company, Dr. Eric Baas and Dr. Bob Steinmetz. I have trouble with that last name, but I'm really excited to be here, and we are not only presenting this to all the viewers out there, but to the entire Illinois College of Optometry, who's going to be in the background, as you guys will see in a minute. So we are going to dive into some important questions about really how to open practice cold. What does that mean? And how do you plan a successful future around that? So let me quickly introduce everyone who we've got on the call. As you know, Dr. Matthew Geller here, and one of our writers and also co-founders of Covalent Careers, an online job matching platform for healthcare professionals, Ryan Court.
Hey guys, how you doing? I'm excited to be on the call and excited to see everybody at Illinois College of Optometry, where I did my residency, and Dr. Baas, Dr. Steinmetz. Thank you guys for taking the time today to chat with us and really inflict some knowledge.
Yeah, and guys, go ahead, take it away. Give yourselves a short introduction there, and just let us know kind of your philosophy.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt. First of all, we want to thank you guys for having us in New Grad Optometry. You guys have served as a great resource to us, and hopefully a resource that many of the students in the room here have already been accessing. It's never too early to start this process. We just want to give a quick shout out to the crowd behind us. We have the Private Practice Club here at Illinois College of Optometry hanging out with us today, and we're going to be talking about starting to practice cold.
Fantastic. Yeah, we are going to make this really fun and very much open, and so let's go ahead and just get started. Ryan, do you want to jump right into it, and feel free to just take it away with really the most important question that we've got for them today.
Absolutely. Guys, starting a practice cold in today's competitive market, it seems like an absolutely daunting task, and you guys are the experts. So really, where does one start when opening an optometric practice cold? What are some of the initial steps that people can put into play, whether they're in school or whether they're actually new graduates?
I think one of the most important things that we need to look at when we're looking at starting a practice cold is, where's the location going to be? Where do you want to practice? Where did you grow up at? Where are your family ties? Where exactly did you happen to do your residency, or what rotations have you been on? And what are your clinical interests? For instance, my background is I graduated from the Illinois College of Optometry back in 2003. And the first thing I did when I got to the Illinois College of Optometry is I tried to find out as much as I possibly could about private practice, because from day one, I knew I wanted to own my own private practice, like many of the people here in this room with us today. So I set up a network so that I could get the advisors in place to let me know what was necessary. What did I need to do in order to start preparing myself for my ultimate goal? It wasn't about what test I was going to take that week. It was about the ultimate goal 4 years from now, about owning my own private practice. So starting out, I wanted to prove that you could open up your own private practice cold, out of school, with absolutely no money. So like many of you here, I graduated with over $225,000 in student loan debt. I had absolutely no angel investor, no family support, and I was able to open up a cold private practice within a couple months after school. That's not always what we recommend, but what we wanted to prove is that this can be done. Everyone in this room can open up their own private practice, and you can have the practice of your dreams if you start preparing now. So start early is what we want to tell you.
I think Bob brings up an excellent point. It's definitely possible to do. We know everyone's coming out, saddled with enormous debt. Our goal is typically to help people learn and see the way that they can set up to where their practices become its own entity, and the practice supports the loan that is taken out to finance to practice, and you're able to actually function independently of your life on the side. You're still going to be paying student loans, you're still going to have expenses, you're still going to have rent, but you can keep those things separate from your practice as long as you start lean. And you're going to hear us talk about starting lean over and over again this evening, and that's really the key to success, and it's the way that you can remove a lot of the fear and risk from starting private practice.
Awesome. I love the concise response. One thing that I've done with a lot of startups, whether it's not exactly opening a practice cold, but it's all about the business plan. And I think this business plan seems like a very daunting thing, when really it's just kind of like a thermostat for yourself as a founder to do things successfully and in the right way. What advice can we give to some of the viewers today about starting or really just creating a very good but not too much weight on it business plan for starting a practice cold?
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, the business plan is kind of, square one, and that's the very first thing that you're going to see when you go to get financing from a bank. When you go in to lease a space, the landlord's going to want to see that you have a plan in place. And the business plan is really your one opportunity to have a personal sales pitch in yourself, how you're going to succeed and why you're going to succeed. And there's a number of different elements that you're going to include in that. You're going to have, an executive summary, as it's typically called, which is basically the overall summary of what your grand plan is, where you plan to open, what the location is going to be, the type of practice that you hope to have. You're going to talk about the products and services that you have. And it's certainly an opportunity for you to discuss and allow someone who's reading it, who may know absolutely nothing about optometry, why you think that you're going to succeed over the people around you. And as we talk to new graduates, as we talk with students who are still going through the process, they're coming out as highly trained as ever. They're in a position where they truly have the ability day one to set themselves apart from the competition and certainly practice a scope of optometry that's well beyond what's happening with a lot of the commercial competition around them.
And just to add to that too, I think part of the business plan, again, is what I alluded to earlier. When you're picking a location or your specialty, it's important now, where you're in school or even when you're just out, in terms of honing in on a specialty and what community you'd like to serve. Are you interested in pediatrics or geriatrics or low vision or contact lens? And that will help to base your business plan on too, is how many children or families are in the area, or what the geriatric market in that particular area is. So right now you can start preparing by setting kind of the foundation for what you want to do when you graduate.
And not only are you going to be talking about the qualitative aspects of the business, but you also want to talk about the quantitative aspects as well. So typically what we do is when we're working with clients, for example, we're helping them put together pro formas, which essentially predicts all of the income, expenses, debt service, patient numbers over the first 3 years of practice operation in an attempt to exhibit for a bank when you expect to break even, and they want to see how you think you're going to be able to pay them back. So you need to have a practice plan in place that shows not only are you going to be able to run a successful practice, but certainly they want to make sure that they're getting their payments back in return.
Yeah, really good questions. Ryan, before you ask the next one, I think you hear about open and cold and it just sounds so daunting, but in actuality, it's really funny. I'm only 2 years out of school. I graduated in 2013, but I was absolutely astounded by how many of my friends actually opened cold within 6 months to a year after graduating. And I guess, can you attest to maybe some of the some of the conversation out there about this being such a difficult and scary process? Is it really that bad?
I believe it's not that bad. People need to know that it absolutely can be done. You need to work hard at it, but you have to know that you don't have to build a $400,000 practice from day one. We can open lean and mean and allow you to build that practice over time. So we can make it a lot less daunting by if we start with very minimal resources, with a lot of knowledge and a lot of help, and be able to know that it is a possibility. In my circumstance, it was leaner than lean. I opened up for $93,000, which is almost impractical in today's day and age, but we can make things happen for a very small amount of money, and we will teach you how to do that. And I think that becomes less daunting once you know more about the process and look at it from a perspective of two people that have started it with little to next to nothing.
I mean, that's incredible. $93,000. I mean, I've seen your practice. There's no way. You're lying to us. There's no way. That's unheard of. That's incredible.
Well, I think that brings up an excellent point, though, is the practice didn't look like that 12 years ago, and that's the key is if you get the door open and you can be open for business versus perhaps just working somewhere else, you start to build that investment, you start to build equity, and you can build your 15-year practice down the road rather than day one. And that's the biggest mistake that we see young graduates make, and even people who have been out practicing for a long time, is they want to chase a larger and larger loan to try to make the process more and more comfortable. Perhaps they came working from a place that was had OCTs and had some of the other bells and whistles in terms of equipment, and they want to bring all that in day one. Well, you can't cold start a high-level medical model practice. You have to build a medical model practice. And in the beginning, it's going to be patients coming in that primarily are coming in for glasses exams. You only need one exam room to begin with. You certainly can, build out the space to have space for more exam rooms in the future. But the reality is you're only going to be operating out of one. So why drop another, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in equipment outfitting the other 2 exam rooms just to sit there and collect dust? And I think that's the biggest difference between getting in for an affordable amount and getting in for an amount that you're over your head starting day one.
Sure, and what it sounds like to me is that you guys probably did a little bit of research on the area on, what ophthalmologist to refer to when it needs surgical management, what colleagues to refer to from an optometric standpoint when you need to do, any specialized testing or anything that could be taken care of. You just didn't have the proper tests in place. So you guys kind of did that on the front end. Once you built that medical model, you were able to obviously bring in more people. You were able to bring in more staff, bring in more electronic devices, all sorts of different things to really properly manage from inside your office.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I know you guys keep mentioning lean, and Matt and I are big advocates of actually a book called Lean Startup. I forgot the name of the author. Matt will be able to chirp in here in a second.
Eric Reese.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, the Lean Startup. Look it up, guys. Incredible book. Probably a really good book for people that are looking to start a private practice cold. But starting lean means getting funding, right, and getting financing. And I can tell you this. It's one thing to actually secure financing. It's another thing to not get actually crushed on the interest rate, especially with the debt that people are coming into. We don't know their circumstances, whether they have families and they have to, no supplemental income. So what do you guys recommend from how you secure finances, and then how do you actually get a good interest rate? I mean, it's got to be tough.
That's a great question, and it's very much different now than it was back when I was starting out. I got laughed out of 11 different banks when I was first starting out because I had absolutely no collateral. And I was living with my mother and staying in a room with my brother. At the time, it was a different time. And now, banks absolutely love optometrists. We met with some earlier today. We've got connections with these financial institutions. We do not default on our loans. I was talking to a bank earlier today, and a portfolio manager, he said he's never had a single optometrist ever default on his loan in his entire 30-year career, which is pretty impressive. So they want to lend us money. They want to see us succeed. The healthcare banking world is thriving right now. And so the rates right now we can get in the 5s, and that is with people that are out of school with $200,000 in student loan debt. They do not need angel investors. It's a possibility. It can be done. And these are also graduated payment loans. So you're not talking about starting off day one with a 10-year loan paying full payment. The first 6 months will be at about $100, the next 6 months at about $800, and then the remaining of the term around $2,000. So there's a lot of options available, and people just need to know that it's out there.
So one of the big things is what it sounds like is, A, banks look at us as a good investment of their money, and B, they give you the flexibility to pay as you grow, which is pretty awesome from a practice standpoint because, like you guys mentioned, you got to walk before you can run. So, awesome.
That's an excellent point. We try to work off of those graduated payment plans, and it's always key to be working with institutions that know the business of optometry. Typically, when you go to a lot of the big banks who just have general business loans and they're giving the exact same type of loan to a coffee shop as they are to an optometrist, they're going to turn us down because we come out and the first thing that we show them, the very first question they ask, almost before they even want to see your business plan is, let's see your personal financial statement. Well, none of our financial statements are pretty. When we come out of optometry school, there's certainly a lot of red, and they shut the door immediately. But as Bob mentioned, those institutions that specialize in optometry are also the same ones that tend to work with dentistry and veterinary and chiropractic who have similar business models. They know that we're a safe play, and in turn, they're able to give us favorable interest rates. We're seeing the best interest rates that we've seen ever since I've been in practice, for sure. My first interest rate was 11%, and that's what it took to get the doors open. We got denied by numerous banks at the time. It happened to be 2008, so it certainly wasn't the best time to be borrowing money in the first place. But the other thing is, you need to get that loan to get started. You always have the option to refinance loans. Once you're more profitable, once you have a few years of tax returns. So it's really more about getting the resources, getting the doors open at a lower amount. Most of the clients that we're working with now, we're getting in at about $225,000 or less. We don't have a single person going over, and we're opening in downtown Chicago, and we're opening in more rural areas. So it really doesn't matter where you're opening. It certainly can be done for an affordable amount. And the best news is, of all, the financing is available.
Can you guys touch on maybe owning a building versus not? I mean, of course, having the real estate seems like it would be a more profitable decision, but that's a big thing, I believe. And can you talk about that and maybe the pros and cons of each? But really, what's the take-home message? How should people go about looking for space? I mean, should they be opening cold in in a practice that's for sale? Is that still considered cold, or do you really have to build it from the ground up? How does that look? How do you really get started on day one when it comes to purchasing space?
Well, I'll let Bob answer the second part of that question, but as far as the first part with leasing versus owning, the reality is in order to get open lien and in order to secure a business loan that's going to truly 100% finance the practice business for you, more often than not, you're going to have to lease to start with. It's certainly attractive to buy, and it's certainly attractive to own with the thought of having equity being built in the building alongside building equity in your practice. But most of the loans that you're going to be working with, like SBA loans, for example, they're going to require a 10% down payment in order for you to achieve the loan. And because it's a government-controlled loan, the timetable is very unpredictable. It can take 3 months, it can take 6 months, some people it may take 9 months to close. Well, the reality is when you're ready to open your business and you have all your other pieces in order, you have your entity set up, you have your insurances in place, your rent abatement is now gone, or if you were doing a lease-to-own scenario, you don't want to be on a timeline. So if you can get in on a lease to begin with, you have a better chance of getting tenant improvements, in which case your landlord will actually give you money towards your build-out. Typically, they're giving you an amount based upon your square footage for 1 full year of rent. So if you have a 1,500 square foot space and they're charging you $20 per month in rent, they're going to typically give you around $30,000 towards your build-out expenses. When you move into a purchase, you're no longer going to get that money, certainly from the person selling the building, because they're going to be selling at the price that that you've agreed to. And then secondarily, there's no room for the bank to build in those leasehold improvements because they're not going to want to exceed what the appraised value is right out of the gate. So I think from a practice building standpoint, you actually have far more flexibility leasing to begin with. 2 people that we're working with currently right now are both in lease to own scenarios, and at a period of 1 year, they'll then have that they've already done their build out, they've already improved the value, but they've agreed on a value to purchase the building at, and they can start the SBA process, and it doesn't really matter how long it takes them because they're already fully operational and making income.
Do either of you actually own the building that your practice is in, or were they both leased then? Or are they still leased?
I currently do not own the building that I practice in. I've written my landlord a letter every few months asking him to purchase, and he's unwilling to sell. And it works out very well, except I don't have the ability to expand right now. But I've had 3 other locations where I've also leased as well, and it turned out to work out better. The real estate market has changed, so it kind of depends on what area that you're in and what opportunity you have and what the cash flow is. But to touch on something previously that we need to mention too is right now it still is important in order to be able to get these loans, you still have to pay attention to your credit as it is right now. Even though you are taking lots of loans out as a student, you need to make sure and protect that credit and your credit card debt. That is much more important than your student loan debt. When we walk into these banks, we have to make sure that your $10,000 in credit card debt might be much worse than your $250,000 in student loan debt. So prepare yourself for success 4 years down the road by making sure you clean up your finances ahead of time so that those options are available to you.
That's an excellent point. When we sat down with the bankers that we're working with, the very first thing they talk about is credit score, and a lot of them have hard-cut credit scores of under 750. They're not willing to loan, and you're not willing to lend, and over 750, it's basically an open gate. So it's very important that everyone focuses on the credit score from day one and do whatever they can to keep it in good standing, because it'll be the #1 factor.
It's funny too, because I got a personal story on that myself. I mean, I was just out of residency, and I actually was the victim of identity theft and did nothing wrong, really have no idea where it came about, and I had to do a lot of work to clean up my credit score. Fortunately, everything was reconciled. I didn't lose any money. My credit score was, it's still good. But it may be beneficial for a lot of people that are either students or new graduates, and I recommend anybody to actually find some kind of credit protection agency to monitor those things, because like you guys said, once you hit a certain point, banks aren't going to look at you. And it may not even be your fault with all the activity that's going online nowadays. Somebody gets into your information and you're kind of, SOL from there. Um, let's see here then. So I guess I'll jump into the next one. What are a few factors that you guys think are important in determining the absolute perfect location? Because the fact of the matter is, I think it was Dr. Bob over there. I would call him because I like that better. Dr. Bob, he he mentioned location is huge, and determining that location, and obviously in real estate, location is huge. Determining your competitors via location is huge. What are some factors, especially when opening cold? It's got to be huge.
Location is the biggest one. And when we're looking at different locations, there's a lot of factors that go into it. I personally believe that it's important to either have ties in the community, you priorly lived in that community, or you are going to potentially live in that community in which you have a partner that lives in the with what we do is we do a lot of research on the demographics. So we want to know exactly what the average median household income is. We visit grocery stores in the area. We look around, and as simple as looking at people's cars that they drive, what's in the driveway. We look at programs that determine how much healthcare dollars are spent within a certain community and where the trend is. Is the healthcare cost rising in that community? What type of insurances do most people in the community take? If you're next to a Caterpillar plant and they have Blue Cross Blue Shield and you're not able to get on the panel, then you're going to be in some big trouble. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. Also competitors. You also want to find out where the closest competitors to you are and what the traffic patterns are. We look at traffic patterns all the time, or where anchor stores are, particularly like Starbucks or something that has a high traffic pattern like a grocery store. So a lot of different factors go into it, but I think one of the first thing that goes into it is certainly location.
I think another point of location too is that we bring up, and sometimes people kind of don't understand the point that we're getting at, but competition's not all bad. And if you go into an area where there's literally not a single other optometry practice, either A, you need to be questioning if you're searching in the wrong area, or B, someone's going to come in. Whereas if you're looking to open a practice, there's already established competition that perhaps has been there for 25, 30 years that is only a mile or two away, and you come in and set up your practice, that more than likely a third optometrist is not going to come into that radius. So you can then immediately size up your competition, know what you're up against. It's potentially going to be someone, if they've been around for a long time, that has outdated practices. Perhaps a lot of their equipment and technology is outdated, and you're able to kind of come in, be the new kid on the block, and establish yourself in that area without worrying about who's going to come next. Whereas if you're the first one to the party, there's a good chance that at any given moment someone else is looking to open up right down the street, and you don't know what kind of backing they have, you don't know what type of business plan they have and what they're planning to do, and the last thing you want to do is find out that you didn't pick the best location.
I think even a good idea right now while you're in school, if you have a potential location that you have picked out, as an innocent student, you can walk into your future competitors' offices and find out what demographic of their patients is, kind of explore, shop around, see what maybe they do well, call the office, maybe ask to shadow the doctor. You can find out a lot of information now as a student that may be more difficult to find in the future.
Yeah, great questions. One of the things that we've had a lot of success with newgradoptometry.com is just giving people the raw kind of steps that they need to do something. So whether it's getting on insurance panels or passing a state board exam or whatever it might be, we try to break it down just very simply, and it tends to relieve a lot of anxiety. We also do the same thing with covalent careers when it comes to finding your first iCare job. And so, can you guys touch on from a really high level what does the step-by-step process look like? I mean, okay, if you're ready to open cold, first thing you want to do is contact the bank. Second thing you want to do is X, Y, Z. And really, from a high level, what does that process look like so we can kind of get what maybe takes a few months to a year in a shorter time span, just to wrap our head around that?
Sure. I think the big, most important step is you have to establish yourself as an entity. So you need to become a company. And typically the best way to do that, especially if you're going to be a solo practitioner or even in a partnership practitioner, you want to set up some sort of corporation. We usually recommend limited liability corporations or LLCs. They then in turn also give you the opportunity to designate yourself as an S corporation for the purposes of filing taxes. And essentially what that means in the end is it just allows everything that's happening in the business to flow through a personal tax return. So you're not getting the double taxation that you sometimes hear about when you talk about larger corporations. And the biggest thing you need to do in the beginning, and again, students can start now, new grads can start now, anybody who's even thinking about it, you really need to establish a good network around you. You need to make sure that you have a good CPA. You need to make sure that you have a good attorney, because the last thing you want to be doing is having those be the limiting factors when it's time to get set up. So you establish your entity, you get your tax ID or your federal employment identification number, and then you can turn around and set up a bank account for your business. And you essentially want to continue to carve out shelters for your business, meaning you want your business to be separate from your personal. And the best way to do that is with that entity to start. Once you've determined your location, then it's a matter of negotiating your lease while simultaneously applying for financing. And both sides kind of want to see what the other side is up to in terms of, whoever's thinking of leasing the building wants to know that you're going to have funding and be able to finance the activities. And of course, the bank wants to know exactly where you're going to be setting up this practice, and they want to have a lease in hand. So those two kind of go in a stepwise fashion. And then the next big part in terms of getting started is going to be the construction element and the build out. So designing the space, a lot of the times when we're working with clients, they don't want to handle the design or they don't even know where to start. We're working with floor plans, we're recommending different color palettes, finishes, and things of that nature. And then you're bidding this out to contractors in order to determine who's actually going to do the work. And I think for many people, that's the most exciting part. We just had a meeting this past weekend with a client and sat down with all the finishes, and everything was pretty abstract up to this point, and you could just see the shift in terms of the nerves have kind of subsided and the excitement level is really amped up, because for the very first time they actually get to visualize what their practice is going to look like. Once you start the construction process, everything sort of automatically moves on to the next step from a physical space standpoint, but at the same time you need to be doing a lot of things on the side to get ready for patient care. And I'll let Bob talk about that in terms of getting set up for the insurances, frame lines and equipment and things of that nature.
I think one of the important things when you're also selecting a location and determining what type of practice you're going to have is what type of equipment are you going to have in the office. And one of the ways that we've been able to go lean is to take advantage of technology in optometry that hasn't changed in many years. A phoropter today looks the same as a phoropter as in 1950, but the phoropters today have illuminated dials and are not necessary for 25-year-olds getting out of school. We do not need that. Gentlemen like myself may need that in the future, but right now I think the best way to go about it is to look at value. We have the ability to source from many different vendors of equipment that is very functional, and the technology doesn't change, like autorefractors and phoropters and chairs and stands that have been reupholstered and refurbished. You do not need to start an OCT when you first open up your practice. We discussed that. But we also have to be careful of what frame lines we're choosing. My practice right now is located in Michigan Avenue downtown. I would not be able to sell the same frame lines if I were on the far southeast side of Chicago where I grew up. It's a little bit different, and we handle each location differently. We have to look at the demographic and what they're willing to spend, and also what their insurances provide. All those things need to be taken into account.
That's interesting, guys. I mean, I noticed you mentioned that you need to find the right people to become part of your arsenal or part of your team. You mentioned an accountant, you mentioned an attorney. You probably have to connect with some of the local representatives from sales reps within the iCare industry. But how do you really go about doing that? Specifically, your accountant and your attorney. I'm just kind of curious. How did you guys find your individual professional group or your entourage?
Well, I think, like you guys found one another, I think, smart people are surrounded by other smart people. And, there's a reason why, everyone in this room got into optometry school. They're intelligent individuals, and they also hung around with other intelligent individuals in undergrad. So I tried to reach out to other people that were also starting their own small business. My CPA or my lawyer that I used, the lawyer that we currently use now is a friend of Eric's, and it's important to source these people from people you may already know and help them out along the way, and then they kind of also help to spread the word about your new business because they're helping you out, you're helping them out, and it helps to grow your practice almost on a referral type of a basis. So I think using the resources in undergrad or people in your community or your buddy that graduated from high school that does construction work that is now going to be a new general contractor, I think it's a great idea. It keeps it in the family.
Well, and I think the other element to that too is, when you work with people that you know and you keep things small, one of the big things that we try to do is we try to not work with any huge accounting firms or attorney or law offices, a design firm. We work with a lot of freelancers. And, everyone, number one, has a more personal and vested interest into the project. And the client gets to know exactly who they're working with. They get to meet these people. They get to shake hands with these people, sit down and talk with them. And I also think you get more favorable pricing when it comes to things like that as well. When you're dealing with an attorney, and when I started my practice, one of my classmates was starting at the same time, and he was paying probably 5 to 6 times the amount in annual accounting fees as I was, and he was actually probably doing more accounting work than I was as well. And a lot of it was just because my attorney, who I was friends with, had recommended a CPA that he worked with. And these people see the value in what we're doing. They realize that we come out, that we have a lot of debt, that we can't afford to pay these exorbitant fees for their services, but they also know that if they serve us well now, our businesses are going to grow. We're going to become larger corporations. We're going to be doing bigger things. And not only are they then at that point going to be able to utilize us for additional services, but we're certainly going to recommend them to others, and they can build through powers in number rather than trying to just slash the initial client and have a very impersonal approach.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo that tremendously. A lot of people ask me, I've done a few lectures on contracts and, whether to form an LLC or remain an independent contractor or an employee, whatever it might be. And a lot of people say, well, how do you find someone? And 100%, you've got a friend who's aspiring lawyer, you've got a friend who's an aspiring CPA, and so look to your network and form those relationships. It'll not only help you with discounted costs, but you can grow with that person. Actually all of the knowledge that I have on the topic is just from having coffee with these people or just being on phone calls, and that's an essential way to grow. I think there may have been a question in the classroom in your guys' upper right, or the way I'm looking at it, upper left.
Do we have a question in the classroom?
Well, it has to do with this topic. Do you find it difficult to work with friends on things that are so close to you, or do you feel like you have to give them a break on things, you look for special pricing from them? How do you deal with that?
So the question was, whether or not we find it difficult to work with our friends in terms of either feeling uncomfortable about pricing or, things becoming uncomfortable as you continue to work. And I think the most important thing, and I think Bob would definitely agree because him and I just had this conversation literally one day ago. You just have to establish ground rules. You have to sit down and understand that when you're working with people that whether it's contractors, whether it's CPAs, whether it's attorneys, you need to establish at the very onset what the expectations are. And the conversation that we were having was about an attorney that we had used, and the question was, are the fees fair? And we felt that everything was in fact fair, and it's just a matter of establishing that up front. Everyone's under the same understanding of what the expectations are, and I think it makes it easier to work together. And as Matt said, you often find these people in casual circumstances, and going off of Bob's sentiment of intelligent people hang out together, they also tend to hang out at bars, at Academy, and other national meetings, and before you know it, you end up in a Google Hangout.
I got the next question for you guys. Let's see where we left off here.
We really suckered them into this, didn't we, Matt? They had no idea this was going to happen about 3 weeks ago, guys. So.
This is definitely super cool. I know we've got a couple other schools watching, Western and SEO. So if you guys are watching in the classrooms, definitely great optometry schools and a bunch of good folks over there. So just to give them a shout out. Ryan, did we ask the one about perfect practice location there?
We did that actually.
Okay.
I know exactly where we're at.
Okay, shoot for the next one.
Yeah, it was sitting on the top of my mind. I actually used to work in human resources and did a lot of recruiting, so hiring, firing. And so I did that for other companies, a lot of tier 1 automotive suppliers out of Metro Detroit. You guys come out of optometry school, you open up practice, you get the business plan, the loan, you get everything going, and then you gotta staff it with the right people. Front desk, optician, office manager. I mean, how do you recommend people go about that? Because if I remember Dr. Baas, when we were talking during my residency, you kept that very lean on the front end. You almost did a lot of the tasks that you could have delegated. And how do you also handle that when you grow?
Definitely. I mean, I think that brings up an important point. I mean, you need to hire experience. It's important, especially if you don't have it. You need to be bringing somebody in who is highly trained, whether it be from an optical standpoint in terms of opticians, whether it be from a billing standpoint. We prefer that people utilize services like Covalent Careers to help find highly trained opticians because they're proven. You know that they're looking for the same types of things. And ideally, you'd like to bring on employees that are going to be there at least for the long haul from the beginning. And what you'll find in our field very often, especially in more metro areas, is the long haul may only be a few years. It's when I was growing up, my optometrist, he had a woman that worked for him, and she had literally worked there for 30 years. And a lot of these cold start practices, especially in cities, you don't really see that quite as often. But it's important to get someone in who's highly trained from the very beginning. And speaking to your point about starting lean, that may be your only employee to start. You may have an optician that helps answer phones. You may be helping to answer phones in the beginning. You are absolutely the office manager to start. You do not want to be spending money on an office manager when there's really no office to manage. You're absolutely the janitor, something you have to accept. And you need to clean the place. You need to make appointments. You need to take phone calls. And as you begin to grow, that eventually goes away, and you're able to hire on more people. And I'll never forget, I was in my first year, and I had a patient come in, and she thought it was so charming and endearing that I had answered the phone and made the appointment. And then 3 years in, everyone was busy. There's chaos in the office because there's patients all over the place. And one's in pre-testing, one's in the exam room, and one's helping sell glasses. And I just so happened to pick up the phone. And her immediate response was, "What are you doing still answering your phones?" And it wasn't so endearing in year 3, but when you're starting, patients understand. I mean, they know that you're a new business, and you want to be out in front of the patient anyways, because that's how you're ultimately going to build the practice. They see you dedicated, that immediately sets you apart from all the other commercial optometrists or places that don't have the personal hands-on approach that everyone that we work with does.
I think it's important too to add in that your current colleagues are great resources as well. So, starting cold isn't for everybody. And I think through sites such as Covalent Careers, if you connect with possibly a private practice mentor and a staff that you're comfortable working with, and you keep in contact with them, because what happens is when we do go apply for financing, they're going to require you to work days outside of the practice. Most vendors we work with will absolutely make that 100% requirement, and you need to be working outside, whether it's a private practice or I was working at a prison on Sundays for quite some time and gained a lot of valuable knowledge and experience and street smarts that I never had before. And it's important though, but if you link up with somebody that's within a private practice and you're working for them, you can also learn things about the practice that you may like that you want to add to your practice in the future. And also things that you may not like. You also may meet some employees that you connect with on Facebook that you may come in contact with later on that may be looking to move locations. And like Mel was talking about earlier, in terms of contracts, that also becomes important if you're planning on starting cold. You want to make sure that those contracts are going to be favorable if you decide to practice in that metro area in the doctor's location on which you're working for at the time. So it's something you need to think about and plan ahead for.
Both of you guys did do a little bit of moonlighting then, right? I mean, that was something that helped power through the beginning infancy of the practice.
Absolutely. When I started, I was working a day a week, actually 2 days a week to begin with at a private practice. I was also at ICO as well. And as Bob mentioned, it's imperative that you have supplemental income. It's the main element of the business plan that they're going to want to see. And it's important, especially when you move towards trying to borrow as little as possible in order to succeed. Your goal is not to take enough money that you can just operationally sit back and go to your practice 5 days a week. The goal is always have your practice open 5 to 6 days a week in the beginning if you can. But three of those days, maybe even 4 of those days, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a doctor there. There's someone there that can facilitate appointments, which is getting increasingly easier as we have a lot of online options for people to use and programs as well. And you need to be there as the doctor maybe only 2 to 3 days a week. Patients like to see other patients in your office. So rather than having 4 appointments spaced 3 hours apart each over the course of a day, you'd like to have all 4 of those appointments together. And then that way you can spend your efforts focusing either working on the outside and bringing in supplemental income, or you can use it being out on the ground and out on the streets promoting your business as well. So supplemental income is a must-do for sure.
I've got a couple of questions over from the West Coast here in California, from Western University. Sorry, guys, I forgot to enable the Q&A prior to starting, and so I can't turn it on now, but they posted on our Google Plus page 8 questions, and maybe we could kind of do them pretty rapid fire. But let's see, where can we begin here? There's a bunch of really good ones, and I think this is one that I would want to know. After 1 year, were you in the red, or red still, or were you in the black? If it was in the black, what was your expense to income ratio? And if in the red, what was the projected date to be in the black? And how did that maintain your lifestyle when in the red? So essentially what they're saying is...
This is rapid fire?
That's we're going to have to. But that's a good one. How do you manage whether being profitable or still taking a hit? What is your lifestyle like? And really, how does that affect kind of the overall outcome?
Those are all great questions, and it's funny when you look at the pro forma now that we develop for our clients, and you look and you go back at the pro forma that I developed when we first opened up. Once you start looking at the pro forma after month 1, you don't often return from it. You return back and reference it. You don't know what to expect maybe after that first month, but typically some of our projections will turn out that we'll be in the black in 6 months. When we opened up our first practice, we were in the black in 3, and that's unusual, but it can happen. It all depends on location and how much you spend on each individual item. So all those things can vary, widely. But when you take a look at the pro forma, it's great for the bank, but some things have to be monitored on the fly. It also depends on what frame lines and what kind of terms you're able to get with these companies and what type of rates you're able to negotiate with buy-in networks. So your pro forma can change based on if you're able to get 30, 60, 90, 120 terms, or if you're going to be able to get frames on consignment, or have a vision contract with a vision provider where they provide you frames. And some of these things can change as you go along. You constantly need to evolve. So it's ever changing.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bob answered the question well, and I think that the element goes back again to supplemental income, and a lot of it just depends on what you're doing on the outside and whether you're attempting to take every added dollar as income or whether you're trying to utilize that income to reinvest back into your practice. So perhaps you're using that added income to bring on in-office finishing and to have an edger at your office, which we're huge proponents of. And we think it's definitely a way to keep things in-house and within private practice as well. And so it just all depends. I think some practitioners, every dollar that comes in above where they're at from day one, as soon as they're in the black, they just consider that to be more income. But what they fail to realize sometimes is if you can restrain yourself a little bit and sustain on what you've gotten used to over the last year or so, you can really reinvest into your practice to where 6 months down the road, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, you have an exponentially greater income because of what you put back into the practice. If you're just taking everything off the top, your practice is going to have a difficult time growing because you're going to be understaffed. You're not going to improve your frame lines over time as your patients increase. You're not going to be updating and upgrading equipment, and you're really going to end up falling behind.
So one more thing to add about that particular question that I think is very important that you need to understand. When you come out of school and you end up going to work for somebody, whether it be corporate or hopefully a private practitioner, you're working to build that individual's or that corporation's practice. When you start cold, you're immediately investing in yourself. And when you invest in yourself, that money that you're bringing in and those relationships that you're making with those patients, they can last a lifetime. So even though your income may be lower in those first few years, you have to realize that if you end up grossing, say, $200,000 in your first year, most practices are worth and will sell for about 60 to 55% of their gross. So you just now have basically socked away over $100,000 in your personal retirement account in something that you actually have ownership of. And that's, I think, the most important thing to consider when you're looking at opening up a private practice. It's yours. Nobody can take it away from you, and you've earned it.
Yeah. One thing I want to touch on there is, some exercises that maybe these folks could go through. And Bob and Eric, give me a nod if these are the statements you want, or the bank statements you want. But the biggest financial statements I think that are important that you guys should start understanding if you want to open cold. One, of course, is your profit and loss statement, or your AKA your income statement. How much money are you bringing in, and how much are you spending? One is your balance sheet, but that's a little bit more probably once you're started. But I think for these folks out there, the cash flow statement could be effective, and it's a way to basically plan what are your expenses or planned expenses month over month, and you could do it for say 18 months, and then also what kind of money are you bringing in and how is that growing? And you could do that in Google Sheets or Excel, but that will give you a good idea of how much cash are you bringing in and how much are you spending. And the best part about that statement is you can decide from that statement how much money you can spend to stimulate growth and how much you need to save in order to make sure that you're not at risk. Can you guys touch on that really quickly? And then we're going to divulge into advertising and then a little bit more of the whole personal sentiment and the courage of starting a practice.
So you brought up an excellent point, and you're exactly correct. You know, the profit and loss statements are definitely key in the beginning, but it's really the cash flow, because oftentimes your P&Ls aren't going to include your debt service. So you're just seeing basically charges, money that you're bringing in, that you're putting into the bank, and then expenses that are going out. When you get to the cash flow statement, then it brings in a little bit more of the debt service, which also includes what you're paying to the bank and any long-term liabilities. And it's definitely, you need to keep an eye on that, and you need to try to, you know, effectively set what I found to be sort of an ever-evolving budget based on what's happening in the practice, so that, again, you're not over-borrowing from the practice or you're overspending. And another key thing to remember is oftentimes, you know, in optometric practice, cost of goods, meaning things that patients purchase that you have a fee for, so whether it be frames, whether it be lenses, whether it be contacts, oftentimes you're going to pay for those the following month. So you don't want to take a month where you had a lot of income and think, okay, well, I can take all this additional money, because what's going to happen is if you have an income spike in one month, you're inevitably going to have an expense spike in the next month. And if you don't prepare for that properly, you're going to constantly be seesawing month to month, falling behind because your expenses are high, and then, you know, taking off the top when income is high, and you're never gonna feel comfortable. So it's always important to, you know, not only plan for the month at hand, but also for the months ahead as well.
Yeah, great point. One of the other questions, following up on just expenses, and then once again we'll dive into some of those other topics. What percentage of expenses go to employee wages, and what is the right place to start paying employees? And if they have other optometrists working for them, you know, what salaries do you pay? And I think in the later part of that question, that's not as much for open and cold, but, you know, bringing on that first employee, what percentage of expenses typically go towards that as a practice matures?
There are certain national averages. When you take a look at a pro forma that is, you know, preferred by the bank, there's one larger branch that, you know, looks at it as possibly 15% on average of, you know, your total income. That may be a little bit different as time goes on. It also depends on how many employees you choose to have or how many you have to have staff. We, again, prefer to go lean with only one employee in the beginning. We also have the opportunity to be located close to an optometry school here where we can bring on students at a less expensive cost as well. But each of those national average can kind of vary from time to time.
We have grimaces in the audience. Yeah. We were all there and we all did it.
Uh-huh. Great. And just you know, just to get specific, some of the things that we use for those things, not with once again opening a practice, but for financial management and stuff, we use QuickBooks Online. But we have an accountant who manages all the tax and all the bookkeeping. But that's a great way to keep books and records. We use Gusto, which is formerly Zen Payroll, and that's, I think, the easiest way to set up payroll. It's kind of a very millennial-friendly, you know, internet side of doing things. Do you guys have any other brand names that you're comfortable putting out there about ways to manage a business?
I mean, we both use QuickBooks, and we recommend QuickBooks to our clients as well. And by and large, you know, we do our own QuickBooks on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, depending on what you're comfortable with. And then our accountants, you know, step in on a quarterly basis to make sure that we're on pace for estimated tax returns, you know, unemployment taxes and things of that nature as well. You know, in terms of marketing, Demand Force is one that we both have used in the past. Yeah, I know Solution Reach is one that people use as well. And those are basically patient management systems. Many of them started in dentistry, and a lot of them have spilled over into optometry and have, you know, proven to be very beneficial. And those are things where patients can communicate with the office, but not necessarily have to do everything via phone call. So, you know, when you're due for your eye exam, you can get a quick email, a text message with a green confirm button. You can confirm the appointment. You can change the date if you need to. It also tracks some of the spending of your patients. It also allows for patient reviews to be left as well, which are huge practice builders. You said we were going to talk about advertising here in a bit, and I think Bob can definitely speak to that, as he's done a lot of cool advertising things through through his practice solo. And I think a lot of us have part of where we can help people is we've tried it all. And the reality is, there's such a change. You talk about millennials, and there's such a change in the way that people consume, advertisements and marketing these days. And a lot of the old ways of, print media have fallen by the wayside. So it's important, and that's expensive. When you talk about printing fees, when you talk about postage, you can really burn a lot of cash that way. And it's difficult to track your returns. Sometimes you don't even know if you're getting a return. Returns can come in years later, where we much prefer the online approaches that you have, where tracking's much easier, and you get much more upfront interaction with potential patients.
Any other advertising tips there?
I've got several advertising tips of what not to do. When I started about 10 years ago, phone books still existed. People actually opened them up and actually looked in there and found local providers. And so we started out with phone book ads, which we learned very quickly did not bring us in very many patients. The website is by far the #1 way to advertise. You must invest heavily in your website. And it's not only important to invest heavily in it in terms of its appearance and advertising yourself, but that is most often your first exposure to patients. Often Yelp could be your first exposure to patients, but after they click on Yelp, they often visit your website. So website's very, very important. But in terms of advertising, I think direct mail, I crashed and burned on that several times. The response on that is typically less than 0.5% or 0.05%, probably nowadays, as opposed to what it was to 10 years ago. I've done bus signs on the side. I've done signs on the L train in Chicago. I have done billboards. I have done coasters at bars. I have done shopping carts at local supermarkets. I have done direct mail, and I've had people mail it back to me saying, please stop wasting paper and don't ever mail it to me again.
Getting the green companies out there. Hey, Dr. Bob, that's funny.
Thankfully, Bob was able to give me a heads up, so I've done none of those things.
Yeah, saved you on that big time. We got a question from Phil here, and it's what are some specific advice and differences of starting a practice cold with 2 ODs in a partnership instead of one? So you guys, it sounds like you both kind of went at it with the approach of you guys are the primary owner. There's no equity share between the two. How would you do that in a partnership approach?
So, go ahead.
Yeah. So just like there, I mean, Eric and I are in a partnership now, and sometimes when you're in a partnership, especially if you meet somebody in optometry school, getting ready for this webinar earlier today, I mean, Eric made me change my outfit. So there are certain things that
no one wanted to see fur.
So when you're looking to partner with somebody, after school or even a couple years down the road, I do think it's much easier because you're able to staff the practice, full time, and that's certainly a model that works very well, and we've seen worked very well in the past. The problem is it's like a marriage. So you have to make sure you're completely compatible with that individual and make sure that your possible personalities maybe don't match exactly to your partner's. Otherwise, you might find yourself on a spending spree, or Eric wants to go pop bottles at the club and spend all the money. So
yeah.
You got to balance it out and make sure that your personalities are compatible for long-term success, and lay down those ground rules early in the form of a contract.
That sounds like actually, I would definitely recommend, drawing up contracts whenever possible in business relationships. There's personal relationships, there's business relationships, and it's always good to have things in writing. Another question out of Western is, are you guys involved in the community or any religious groups much to help increase your network? And do you have any other methods for this in regards to actual, hit the ground running networking? I mean, there's a lot of obviously payment found, and when you guys start a practice, you don't have a lot of funds to put money into a lot of different formats of networking. So what are some ways that you guys recommend?
I would say join everything. When you're in the community and you are recognized in the community, you can build those relationships through community involvement. I'm very involved at my child's school that is right next door to my practice. We support it heavily, and they support us heavily. And when you're involved in the community, patients know. They see you out patronizing local businesses, and they appreciate that you're visible in the community. I think any club or organization that you can join that will allow you potential patients is certainly a good idea. Chamber of Commerce and Kiwanis and Lions Club and service organizations all have been great practice builders for many, many years. You know, social networking now is, I know, very important, but building those face-to-face relationships allows you contact with those people that also expand your network within the community. Also, too, local awards that you may get for your community service help to bring in those people. You can advertise it on your website and Yelp. That also helps to bring in other patients as well.
On the same note, at my practice, my landlord actually was the University of Illinois Chicago, so I'm on a college campus, and we were able to meet with the trainers there and establish ourselves as the team optometrists for their athletic department. And that was a great thing to become a part of, not only from an actual patient standpoint in terms of getting the athletes in as patients, but it was a great marketing tool that we didn't have to pay for. So, you know, it helped us gain exposure initially when we didn't necessarily have a lot of money to be throwing around on marketing, and established us as, you know, pillars of the community, people that were contributing. We were doing it at no cost. And you know, those are the types of things that you can do, and it doesn't have to be a college team. It could be high school teams. It could be, you know, elementary school teams in CYC, Kiwanis, like Bob said as well. So the more that you can establish yourself as someone who's there to stay, the better you're going to see the returns in terms of patients committing to you. And oftentimes, especially if you're in an area with families, you know, once you get one person in, chances are you're going to get the whole family for years to come.
I think that's true, guys, because if I remember correctly, we decided to do this over beignets in, you know, at Cafe du Monde in New Orleans. And so there is something really to be said about face-to-face interaction, and half of life and half of the battle is just showing up. So it sounds like you guys showed up to a lot in your community, and your community kind of came back and supported you in return.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you know, when I was first job out in San Diego, it certainly wasn't a cold practice, but it was a cold patient base for me. Some of the things that I did, and just tips for you guys, local health food markets or holistic pharmacies tend to be great places to lecture, and typically the lectures are around, you know, holistic dry eye management and natural ways to help the eyes. I did a lot of YMCA for senior citizens and talked a lot about cataract surgery and helped answer their questions. And slowly but surely that would help to bring patients in. And so for me, lecturing in the community was a really, really easy way to do it. And one led to another, which led to another. I didn't have as much success with like professional networking groups, but just did as much genuine things I could for the community. I even went door to door and, you know, knocked and let them know and handed out some, you know, eyeglass cleaner and things like that, and every little bit helps, but it's all about the exponential effect. It seems like you're going nowhere at first, and that first day is tough, but then it really starts to snowball. So don't get discouraged for those who are first starting. Can you guys touch on, well, actually, can we get some of the wonderful Chicago folks in that room to ask some questions?
We certainly can.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, we got two in front here.
So I'm interested in some practice, but I'm going to be going back to a state that's pretty compacted, has 3 optometry schools there already. What are you doing to differentiate yourself from other people, especially if you're coming in cold, or if you're coming in and there's a couple other established practices? Like, what specific things do you do aside from like the marketing, rooting yourself in? What things do you do to separate yourself?
You want to start with that?
Can you repeat that question real quick? It was a little bit in and out on our end.
So the question was, you know, he's planning on going back to what's considered to be a saturated area with multiple optometry schools, you know, within the vicinity. And what do you do to differentiate yourselves from the other practices to come in as a cold start and, you know, establish yourself as a successful practice?
I think what everybody needs to remember is that as a new graduate, you are more highly trained than any of your local competitors, because you just graduated with privileges that I had to fight for years ago, and you guys are very well trained in them already. So I think an important way is to offer specialty type services, specialty contact lenses, medical necessary contact lenses. Carve out a niche, whether it happens to be your passion for vision therapy or pediatrics, or, you know, treating emergencies. I mean, in the beginning for us, 24-hour emergency on call. I had an emergency this morning. I walked in the door. It was somebody that called, you know, early this morning that woke up with extreme pain, and they needed a Procera biotissue contact lens, which was a patient we've never had before, found us on our website, know that we had 24-hour emergency service, and they ended up being $1,750 billed to insurance later for just the fact that we had 24-hour on-call services. So a lot of these established practitioners maybe aren't willing to offer those things. So I think being able to specialize in a unique form and advertise it and make sure that you network with local ophthalmologists to let them know that you are a specialist in scleral contact lenses, you are a specialist in dry eye management, post-surgical management, and let them know that you're ready and available to help them, and you have time on your hands, ladies and gentlemen. You're not seeing a lot of patients in the beginning, so you have time to make all these visits, and that's one way you can kind of get out in front of your competition that maybe just are used to set in their ways.
Absolutely. Touch on that too, real quick. You know, reaching out to ophthalmologists, if you're going to be doing something, especially contact lenses, reaching out to primary care doctors in the area to let them know that you can manage diabetic cases that, you know, don't have proliferative diabetic retinopathy or CSME. I mean, that will, it's in itself, open up the floodgates for referrals. I mean, make yourself known that you have time, experience, and training to really treat their patients the proper way, and to help report back with the proper documentation to improve their charting and a lot of times their HEDIS scores.
Right, and I think a lot of it also just goes into the amount of, you know, due diligence and research you do on the front end and choosing that location in the first place. You know, I think I would certainly argue that, you know, 6 years ago, 7 years ago when I opened my practice, 10 years ago, 12 when Bob did his, you know, everyone was telling us, Chicago's saturated. There's nowhere to open a successful practice in this city. I mean, we have the largest and oldest school. A lot of people want to stick around when they're done, whether it be opening practices or working for others as well. And it seems to be a highly competitive market. Yet we continue to open successful private practices. So, you know, the real key is you need to make sure that you're picking a good location to begin with, and then set yourself apart. You know, if you're coming in and it can't be done, you're probably opening in the wrong place to begin with.
Can you guys talk about some of the, you know, we're coming, oh, actually, you know what, more questions from the audience. You guys have sat there so patiently and are fantastic, so let's do that.
In regards to the exposure in insurance, I know a lot of people find out about the practices by, you take my insurance. Which insurances do you choose? How many do you choose to accept?
Okay.
The question is which insurances do you take, and possibly, you know, in the beginning, which insurances do you choose to take and what not to accept? And my advice when you're starting out with no patients in the chair is to take absolutely everything. That means Medicaid, that means public aid in some states, and government insurance, and every type of vision plan under the sun, because you have absolutely no patients in your chair. That one patient that may have Medicaid or maybe on a non-preferred vision plan also has family members. And when they leave and they're satisfied with your services, because you've had a lot of time you're able to spend with them, they will refer their friends and family. And I asked every one of them when I checked them out, you know, hey, I'd really appreciate it. If you know anybody else that needs anything, here's a couple of my cards. I'd appreciate it if you send them my way. So you can always drop insurance plans in the future. But in the beginning, you're not seeing any patients. So you might as well get every type of insurance plan you can and bring those patients in the door. And if it's a poor vision plan, you have to also remember they also have medical insurance. So even though they might be a local public service worker that only gets to pick from a certain selection of frames, they may have a foreign body in their eye a week later from doing yard work that you may need to build their medical insurance for. So anytime you're able to bring a patient in a chair in the beginning, it's a positive because it's a practice grower. It's not costing you anything to internally market. So when you try to capture their friends and family while they're in the chair, it's a perfect time to do it, and it costs you absolutely nothing.
I can't answer it any better than that.
What about some of the long-term dreaming here? I mean, you know, as a solo practice, and you know, what are some of the upper limits? What can some of, I mean, I know some of those faces in that crowd are going to have some of the most successful practices that the United States of America has ever seen. They're sitting right there. What are some of the higher end aspirations that we can look forward to, both from an income? Well, let's focus on the income portion and revenue portion, because we know about the personal satisfaction that comes from seeing patients and things like that. But how much can a private practice grow?
It's a great question, man. I like personal questions. I'm really we're willing to share a lot of personal data, student loan debt, things like that. When you're starting a private practice cold and you have 0 patients, which I've done a couple times now. My latest private practice that was cold started 10 years ago with 0 patients. We now have over 17,000 patients and gross over $2 million a year. We're one of the larger single-door private practices in the city of Chicago. And it's real. It's real, and it's a lot of fun. And we get to enjoy ourselves quite a bit. You get to make a lot of time for your family and for sporting events and for different things that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise by working for somebody else or working for a corporation. So the numbers are real. It can be accomplished, and it can be accomplished on a shoestring budget in the beginning, and you can get to that point within 2 years. Or not within 2 years, but within 10 years, I think it's very achievable. But you can grow $1 million practice in certainly less than 5. It depends on how hungry you are and how hard you want to work and what your mentors are and what kind of advice you had along the way.
Dr. Bob, if I remember correct, actually, I think iCare advisors can get you there in 2 to 3 years. Isn't that correct? Is that how that works?
Fact.
Tell us a little bit about the company.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say we really haven't given you guys enough of a stage, and I think that we've been talking about how to do it, and a lot of people may walk away from this going, still, I feel like there's something missing. And tell us about what iCare advisors do.
Well, and I think part of our approach for both Bob and myself is more of a personal approach with iCare advisors. We want it to be a conversation. We want to be promoting private practice optometry. It's the reason that we're not sitting here trying to plug ourselves, but more get people interested in it, and more than anything, make it a reality for new graduates and help them realize that it can be done. Essentially what we do as advisors is we go start to finish with everything that we just discussed, and we do it all on a personal level. So we meet with clients in person, we do site visits, we go down and help them with the design, with the layout. We help them, depending on the area that they're in, either provide attorneys and CPAs for them, or help them find and secure them. From a design standpoint, we help get an efficient layout. We also try to make sure that they're in a square footage that is not going to be overwhelming to them, and that's going to be manageable from the beginning, that potentially has room for growth. We're trying to make sure that they're set up from a tax standpoint and from a legal standpoint properly. And from there, and Bob can speak more to it, we get really involved when it comes to the process of selecting your frame lines, determining what equipment is going to be best for you. And basically we want it to be a partnership. So when we work with you, our goal is not to, even though we do, we don't want to just do the entire process for you and hand you the keys day one and you walk in and have no clue how to run the practice when you get there. Our goal is to keep you involved, keep you invested in the process as you go along, so that by the time you get to day one and you're ready to open for business, you have the tools that you need and you've learned what you want to along the way. But along the way, you've gotten to become, intimately involved with what you think is the aspects that you enjoy most. If you want nothing to do with design, we'll take care of the design elements for you. If you want to do all of the design and colors yourself, but don't know how to do, the space planning and construction, we'll handle those aspects as well.
I think the most important thing, too, we just love it. I mean, this is a ton of fun for us. We love meeting our clients. We love walking them through the process. It's a ton of fun. It reminds us of, us just a few years ago. I mean, we've walked in your shoes. We're very different from other providers out there. We care passionately about private practice, but we've been there. We understand how much student loan debt that everyone has and how hard those obstacles are to overcome. And so we want to be able to answer those phone calls at 12 o'clock at night and those text messages at 2 in the morning where people are panicking. We want to walk you through billing and coding. We want to tell you which lenses are going to be the most profitable, which labs you're going to need to use, why certain frame lines will be more profitable with certain insurances over others. We're prepared to handle that, and we enjoy that. We enjoy answering emails at odd times of the night, and it's important to us that you succeed because it's a direct reflection on us, and we want to make the process personal.
Great stuff. Let's do.
Looking at the background of the students there, and they're all looking at both doctors here, and they're like, "We already know how to do this stuff, right, guys? You guys already know how to do everything. You heard it." No, okay, never mind. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn when you get out. It's a lifelong learning process, and embrace it, because it's something where if you're going to be successful, you got to continue to keep your foot on the gas.
let's do one more question, guys, and then we'll just kind of do a short outro. This is from Faiz over on YouTube. He posted it. Will working for a private practitioner right out of school and taking a pay cut compared to a corporate chain put you ahead in the long run? Or is it more important to make as much as you can right out of school so you can have the money to invest in your practice? And I think, I think there's a common sentiment out there that you can make a little bit more quick cash in corporate, and that's probably the case, but not always. In my experience, I've seen that be a little bit different. For example, I've seen a doc work for an ophthalmologist and make more income than any of my colleagues at our age and our graduation year. But what do you guys think in terms of generating that cash quickly working for someone else versus more of the slow pace?
Well, I think, speaking off of kind of what Bob just said in the last question is, above all, it's important to enjoy what you're doing. If you don't enjoy it, it doesn't matter if you're making an additional $10,000 a year or not, you're going to be miserable. Additionally, given the amount of student loan debt that many students have when they come out, they're going into loan programs that have income-based repayments. So if you're making additional income, you're just going to be paying higher loan amounts back anyways. And I think the reality is, you need to prepare yourself to succeed. So if you're in that commercial setting and you're perhaps not learning anything about private practice, and you stay there for 2 years and make an additional, $20,000, $30,000 over those 2 years, and then turn around and try to open a private practice, you may not have gained any of the tools that you need. Whereas if you worked in a private practice setting, learn the things, which is what I did. I worked for a little over a year in a private practice setting where I had the, had the luxury of being in charge of some of the operations and working in the optical and working with staffing and patients alike. And I really learned a lot of the things that I wanted to implement into my own practice. And equally, if not more important, I learned a lot about the things that I didn't want to implement. It was an older practice. There were a lot of outdated things taking place in terms of operations. And I knew that's kind of, for me personally, that's where the whole lean concept came from. This practice was anything but lean. Way overstaffed. A lot of people sort of mistrained as things evolved over time. They didn't keep up. So I think, when it really comes down to it, certainly it's going to be a personal decision. But to chase that a little, that additional income, if you come out and you can get into a private practice, you can prove your worth to that practice owner and that associate and find a good match for yourself through someone like Covalent Careers and make sure that you're in a good position. You're going to be happy with what you're doing. You're not going to feel bad about the fact of what could I be making elsewhere, and I think in the end you'll end up in a much better place.
Yeah, fantastic. I can't speak enough about the importance of quality of life. I mean, if you are not in a good mood day to day, your future creativity or your current creativity is very stifled to create future great things, and you have to be happy. And I would say a year, just like you said, making an extra, say, $10,000, $20,000, but if you're disappointed, not that a corporate opportunity would do that, but any opportunity where you're disappointed is going to hurt you more in the long term. I'd rather take the pay cut and be happy. That's the way for future success, I'd say. This has been just absolutely fantastic, and we're 100% going to do another one, but I think in the interest of everyone's time, we should start to close it out and maybe put in a couple more tips. From my side, really, I want you guys to check out newgradoptometry.com. A lot of what we're talking about is on there from the standpoint of insurance and getting started in practice and things, and I know we're going to have Bob and Eric contribute some content there. And you can find this Google Hangout actually probably in about an hour once it's actually live. It's being recorded, and so check out that site. And I know a few times tonight you heard covalentcareers.com, and for all the folks not opening cold right out of school, Covalent Careers is an online job matching and job discovery platform, and you could create a profile, kind of like a LinkedIn profile, but actually see employers who are looking to hire optometrists. So absolutely check that out in your free time. Ryan, do you have closing thoughts on that? And then Bob and Eric, I want to toss it back to you guys to kind of give your final sentiment on this whole idea of opening cold and really what really matters at the end of the day. What's the final tip?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to echo what Matt said. Definitely two excellent resources, newgradoptometry.com, covalentcareers.com. But guys, you guys are at the beginning of your career. Some of the people watching this are, already out practicing. Some of these people watching this may have been out for 10, 15 years. It's never too late to make a transitional move. And when it comes to actually building your own brand, whether it's within somebody's practice already and you want to buy into it, or you want to open up cold, you want to, have an opportunity where you're working for somebody, just an employee, the fact of the matter is you got to choose your own destiny, right? And a lot of times the first opportunity you take or the first pathway you take may not be the exact pathway for you, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, you're going to learn from every experience. You're going to become a better person as you do learn, and you'll become a better professional as well. So these two guys right here, I 100% recommend you reach out to them if you have any advice from anything really, but definitely from opening cold. Matt and I are always welcome to answer questions you guys have. So feel free to utilize us all as resources.
Yeah, I got to say one more thing there. Ryan and I had the pleasure of having dinner with them at the Academy just 2 weeks ago, and I mean, if you guys end up working with iCare advisors, you're working with Bob and Eric, and I think it's so important to have a personal relationship with the person who's going to be developing your future. And I personally can't recommend someone as cool as these guys. They're really fun to work with, super insightful.
Smart, right, Matt? Smart.
Very much.
Smart people run together.
From our perspective, more people don't say. First of all, we just want to thank New Grad Optometry for making this possible. Certainly, it was our first Google Hangout for both Bob and I think overall it went pretty well, and hopefully people walked away with some great knowledge from this. Private practice, starting cold is not for everybody. For those, we love what you guys are doing with Covalent Careers. It's an awesome platform and definitely a good resource. And for us, in closing, our goal ultimately is to get people to start lean, utilize all their resources, that are available to you. And, most importantly, you gotta grow with your practice, not ahead of it. Don't try to build your 15-year practice in day one, because you'll never get out of the gates. Make sure that you're starting in a manageable level, and you can certainly succeed, and sky's the limit as to what you can achieve.
Hey, Coach, well, thank you guys. It's been a lot of fun. We just want to let everyone out there know that this is possible. This is real. I think the most surprising thing we find is when we meet with clients, they have a number in their head, and they never thought it would be anywhere near $200,000. And now that they know that that's a possibility and that we can make their dream a reality, I mean, we just want to make you happy. And everyone deserves to be happy, and owning your own private practice is really rewarding. We both have been very happy with our lifestyle, and this has been fantastic run here. We really appreciate the platform, and we'll do it again.
Absolutely, guys. I'm going to leave up my screen here. I think you can, for the viewers out there, to check out iCareAdvisorsLLC.com, see the transparency that these guys have and really what they're all about. And I know you can connect with them through the form on that site and catch them at some of the bigger optometry conferences and things like that. And so really just much appreciated. And I'd really love to have Bob and Eric back on. So if we can get a crowd applause for them to bring them back, I think they'll be nice. All right, guys, cool. I will end this now, but thank you, everyone. Any last thoughts, Bob and Eric, or we'll sign out?
I think we're good to go. Thanks for having us.
All right, I don't want it to end. No. All right, take care, guys.
Have a good one.
Guys, take care.